Hello everyone. So this lesson is for our boys of class 9, A, B and C, okay, English literature. So with the previous work and videos, I've already completed your chapter, that is the poem that we've already finished, that is television. Alright, so I would expect you all to use your workbook to solve the answers to the questions, which I'll also be sending you certain question and answers to the previous chapter, television. All right. So today we'll be doing a poem called After Blenheim by Robert Southey. All right. So here, After Blenheim is actually in the form of a ballad. All right. It is an anti-war poem, and also. See here, and it centers around the most famous battle of the Spanish Succession. Blenheim is the English name of the German village Blenheim that is situated on the left bank of the river Danube in Bavaria, that is in South Germany. The poet here has focused on the common man's ignorance of the main motives of war. In November 1700, Philip II, the grandson of King Louis, the 14th of France, had ceded the throne of Spain. Austria and other European countries did not like this development. They felt that this was planned by the French king to increase his power as well as his influence. So there was a war that broke out in 1701 between Austria and France. And later England and Netherlands became allies. Allies means friends with Austria. On the other hand, Bavaria, Cologne and Mantua and Savoy became allies with France. Gradually, Portugal and other German dominions, Prussia and Hanover, joined the war with Australia. I'm just giving you a kind of a background for the development of war in Blenheim. All right. So this was actually a Spanish repercussion of the Spanish Succession, and a war broke out between France and Austria and other European countries. So the heroes of the war were the Duke of Marlborough of England and Prince of Savoy. So Robert Southey had adopted an anti-war attitude in this poem. The poem is a harsh criticism of the horrors of war. It has projected the fact that international diplomacy, politics and war are matters that are away from the lives of the common people. They provide the war heroes but remain ignorant of the cause of war. Through Old Casper, Southey has revealed the truth, the inability of the ordinary citizen to access the causes of war. What they fought each other for, I could not well make out. That is what Casper says in the poem. This is what he tells his grandchildren, the horrors of the war. Not only were his parents rendered homeless, but plenty of young mothers had lost their newborn children. Southey has related the horrible sights, thousands of bodies rotting in the sun, which was considered as a yardstick of a famous victory. So, which means to say, like, a victory is only a victory if there are a lot of people dying in the war. Alright, so that becomes a yardstick, that becomes a measurement. That is how you measure a successful war. That is very, very inhuman, isn't it? But then that is the truth. That is how you provide for that is how you access how a particular war was it successful or not. So anyway, Southey has ironically commented that things like that, must be after a famous victory. Okay, so this is the ordinary mind setup. So that is the yardstick, which is very inhuman. That is why there are a lot of people who are pacifists. Pacifist means a person who does not believe in war. Alright, because there are some people who believe that we need to have war to build up peace. Alright, which is a very ironical statement. You can never have a war for peace. So in this particular poem, it actually exposes the ordinary feeling, the people who actually are the unsung heroes who actually die in the war. They are not the soldiers. We are talking about the ordinary people who die, who lose their life. And not only that, they lose everyone, of when they lose their lives, that is the end of it. But then when they have to live, the people who live after the horrors of war with no one around them, they have loved, they have lost their loved ones, they have to even they have lost they're rendered homeless, they don't have a home to live. So these are the horrors of war that comes up, which is not totally put into a picture. So that is actually in a very gruesome way, we have to say, that becomes a yardstick, that becomes a measurement of how successful a war has been. If there are more people who have died, if there are more people who are rendered homeless, there are more destructions around, that shows that that particular war was a successful one. So that is a very ironical statement. You never need to have war to reinstate peace in a country, or even in the world. So after the Second World War, there's always a looming danger of having a Third World War. Alright, so anyway, even if you look at the pandemic situation right now, looks like the pandemic situation is a very successful situation, because there are a lot of people suffering. The GDPs of all the countries have all gone down. There's an economic crisis around. So I think, I personally think that this is how a successful pandemic is carried on, with many people dying around you, and with a lot of difficulties that you have to face. So, but then I know that it is an ironical statement to say this, but then this is how, at the end of it, the common man always suffers. So here too is a common man suffering, and it is Old Casper. It is narrated through a man, whose name is Old Casper, and he's talking to his grandchildren. He has two grandchildren, and he's talking about the horrors of war. And then he says that this is a common sight, things like this that must be after a famous victory. So even he has acknowledged the fact that many people die, in a strife, in a battle, in a skirmish. So here, Old Casper here is a representative of the ordinary citizens who are passive onlookers. To them, war means death, devastation, hunger, chaos, confusion, disruption of peace. The poet has condemned war through the innocent small children. 'Twas a very wicked thing, that is what the grandchild says. And what came of it at last, and Casper had without any hesitation acknowledged. Why, that I cannot tell. The poet has depicted the futility of war through the innocent children. The poet uses the innocent children as his mouthpiece, alright? It is through them he has expressed his disapproval of war. The repetition of phrases, great victories and famous victory, proves the question in the reader's mind. But what good came of it at last? By repeating the phrase throughout the poem, at the end of 7 verses, he has projected the ignorance of the mass of people, alright, who are very eager to learn the real cause of the happening, as they attempted to know the importance of the wind, leaving its purpose. The irony here has revealed the futility of war. The poet has, through the war, commented on man's cruelty to man. So you are not cruel to anyone else in the war. You are cruel to man, is cruel to man. So that is a very, very, again, a very ironical situation. Humanity is lost. So he has projected the fact that in spite of the loss incurred in war, man will never suppress his greed, his ambition to prove his might. He is worse than animal. He kills his fellow to achieve his goal. The great victory, an animal will never kill another animal of the same species, but a man does. So that is how wicked, how cruel, how gruesome a man is only to feed his greed. Okay, so if you look at the most important developments around in the world, you will see that most of the war were fought not because of big problems. All right, it started off, it flared off with a very small problem. So anyway, it was, you know, greed of extending your empire, or maybe greed of having a little more money. So you will see history is full of these examples, like how a single man's ambition leads to a big strife and often leads to a world war. So World War One, World War Two, if I don't even have to get into the explanation of it, it is all very open and it is all very evident why First World War, the Second World War, the Cold War, and the little battles that were fought were actually fought. It is because of a single man's greed and ambition. All right. So here, the poem has been written in the form of a ballad, like I told you at the beginning, relating the war story. The poet has made use of various narrative techniques to relate the famous battle in the war. The richness of expression is clear in its use of rhetorical skills. Rhetorical skills here means a figure of speech, which I will be explaining it to you as I explain the poem. The refrain has been used throughout. Refrain means repetition. There's a certain repetition of words. Now the poet deliberately does this. He repeats certain phrases, certain phrases, certain words, so as to put an emphasis on the idea. So that is known as a refrain. Okay. So here he uses a refrain. Certain things like this, you know, must be after a famous victory, like which is repeated, which also gives up an idea to us that this is normally what the poet detests, what the poet is not like. So he's writing an anti-war poem, through which he tries to give us an idea that war does nothing good but brings about a lot of destruction. So anyway, the rhyme scheme and alliteration have been used effectively to create a musical note to enhance its poetic quality. Southey has chosen to pronounce the horror and ferocity of war by introducing the strange round object. Now there's a round object that he uses particularly there, and that happens to be the skull. Okay, the skull that was found in the fields, and the little child is playing with the skull, and he brings the skull to the grandfather and shows it to the grandfather and says like, what is this? And then when he looks at the skull, he says that he recognizes it, that it is the aftermath of the battle, like a person's skull, the person who has who has been slain in the battle. So then that is how he talks about the ferocity of war, and he says it in his statements that some poor fellow's skull who fell in the war is an honest revelation of the truth that this was a regular discovery. So it becomes a regular discovery for them to find, skulls around in the field when they are working, when they are plowing the field, when they're working, when they're doing their work on a daily basis. They find all these, when they have to dig the ground, they find all these, skulls, the bones of people who have been slain in the war. So this is something that is an everyday sight for them, and it's a regular discovery, and he makes an honest revelation there. And often when I go to plow, the plowshare turns them out. That means when he's trying to dig it, like it turns it out from the ground. Has been mentioned to prove the horrors of the aftermath of war. Alright, so this is what the poem is all about. So in the next video, I'll be giving you a detailed summary and explanation of the lines. Okay, so till then, so what I want you to do is please read the poem once, so that when in the next class you can open up your book and you can just listen to the explanation given to it. Thank you so much for listening.